Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts. Relief tonight in Nunavik, where two young people missing on the land for days have been found alive. Will Unaluk and Viola Novalinga left Pavernatuk by snowmobile Sunday night. They were traveling to Iqaluit when they were reported overdue. The search for Unaluk and Novalinga began Monday morning. Crews looked for them by snowmobile and airplane. Then, this morning, a call back to the community. Unaluk was found. Half an hour later, Novalinga was located. Community members are happy the pair was discovered.
It's very happy community right now. There's a lot of help, lots of people helping. They're going through the radio right now. Very happy. Some out-of-towners, Iqaluit, Inuit, Kangsura, and Canadian rangers were helping.
Galingo says the Skidoo ran out of gas and the pair started walking. They were located 20 kilometers from home. Novalinga has been sent to the local hospital for observation. Unaluk has been sent to Montreal for treatment of frostbite on his feet. The leader of the Gwich'in Tribal Council is leaving his region. Grand Chief Ken Kikavicic is moving from Inuvik to Edmonton. His staff confirmed the move with CBC this week. The CBC's Des Loreen has more.
The Grand Chief's office is confident that the move will not affect his ability to lead. In an email to CBC confirming the move, his office says Kikavicic will work out of Inuvik or Fort McPherson for 7 to 10 days of the month. The rest of the time will be spent in Edmonton or traveling for meetings. Reducing the cost of travel as Grand Chief was one of the reasons cited for the move. I reached out to the chiefs of Fort McPherson and Sigachik. Both declined to comment. I also spoke with former Premier of the NWT and GTC President Richard Narasu. He also declined to comment, saying that the matter should be discussed within the community. Kikavicic has not responded to a request for interview at this time. Des Loreen, CBC News, Inuvik.
The NWT is getting 100 more public housing units imminently. The territory's housing minister made the announcement in the Legislative Assembly today.
These 100 units are the first expansion of public housing stock made in decades. Now, as the 23-24 fiscal year comes to an end, all 100 of these new units are either complete or will be complete within the next 6 months. These units were all constructed by companies from the north.
Kuptana says 60 of the units will be for singles. There will be 30 duplexes for families and 10 units will go to seniors outside regional centres. Kuptana says significant one-time federal funding helped make this possible. The NWT's new carbon tax exemption will come into effect April 1st. When that happens, home heating oil bills will decrease, and they're not the only thing that will be seeing a cut. People in the territory will also see their cost of living offset payments drop. That's according to the territory's finance minister. She explains what the offset payments are meant to achieve and why they'll be lower when the new carbon tax exemption kicks in.
So everyone gets a cost of living offset, or really, it's a carbon tax offset is what it is. It's meant to take off the burden of the carbon tax. So it doesn't speak to the fact that the North is facing some pretty high fuel costs right now, and that fuel costs have remained very volatile. So, reminder in that sense, it's not a fuel subsidy. That would be a whole different conversation. It really is an opportunity for us to look at the average amount of tax paid by a household for carbon tax on all forms of fuel usage, and then we added a heating enhancement to it. That was when the federal government made their last round of changes. And that heating amount was calculated based on heating oil predominantly. Well, basically, it's looking at fuel volume use, and we then did an estimate on that to say, okay, how much extra enhancement do we need to add to everyone to take into account that carbon tax on heat? When they've taken off now the heating oil, and when we've followed suit with heating oil, that's about 80% of the Northwest Territories that uses heating oil. So we've reduced the heating enhancement by that 80%. So, for example, Yellowknife and Hay River would be both in Zone A. They are now going to be going to $441 for an adult and $505 for children in Zone A. Zone B communities, $451 for an adult and $515 for children. Zone C, $470 and $534. So that's your annual. So then you divide it into 4 payments. Decreasing it is a reflection of the fact that we now have less revenues coming in. So when there's not a tax revenue coming in from the heating oil source, that reduces the amount of revenue the government gets. So we still are trying to keep the tax relatively close to being, and frankly, it is revenue neutral at the end of the day.
That's NWT Finance Minister Caroline Wozniak. She was talking about the impacts of implementing a carbon tax exemption on home heating oil. Now, that exemption has some people cheering in the NWT, saying it's about time. Others saying it's a step backwards. The CBC's Mahnur Mubarak has more.
Some people agree with the tax exemption, while others are totally against it. Sandra Hazar uses propane to heat her home in Yellowknife and was disappointed when she found out the news. She says it's unfair the tax exemption is only for people using diesel.
We're all living in the cold. We all have to heat our homes, but we should be all treated equal. That's not right. Just because one burns oil and one burns propane, we all deserve the same break. All of us.
John Dalton heats his home using a wood stove and diesel. He says while the carbon tax is a good thing, it's good people are getting a break.
Every little bit counts. And in today's world and today's economy, that sometimes can go a long way for a family.
Ecology North, an environmental group in Yellowknife, is not supportive of it. Dawn Tremblay is the group's executive director.
It's a hollow announcement because it removes the incentives for people to make change. And during this time of multiple crises, the climate crisis, and in time when we just need climate action at every level, especially from our leadership.
But a former MLA leader says it's about time. Jackie Jacobson is the former MLA for Nanakput, the northernmost district in the NWT. He's been pushing for a tax exemption for years. In fact, he'd like more than what's been announced. A carbon tax cut for everyone, not just people using diesel to heat their homes. He says the carbon tax raises the price of shipping, making groceries more expensive and adding stress to those living in northern communities.
The impacts the carbon tax is having on the small communities and the whole territory as a whole, and the cost of living are pushing people out of our territory. It's people in our small communities that are most affected.
The tax exemption on heating fuel comes into effect on April 1st and will last for 3 years. Mahnur Mubarak, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Flood and fire season is fast approaching in the Yukon and the NWT. Last year, the first evacuations happened in May. Now, one NWT minister is urging people to be prepared for what he calls the high-risk season. Natalie Pressman has that story.
Individuals and families should have household emergency plans, emergency kits, and emergency contact information available. Property owners and businesses should have insurance and plans to protect their property during emergencies.
Vince McKay is the Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs. With climate change, he says the NWT can expect more wildfires and floods, and preparedness is essential.
I urge all residents to consider this as a 2024 high-risk season approaches.
Jay McDonald is the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. In the legislature yesterday, he said his department is also anticipating a difficult fire season.
Additional fire crews and aircraft will be engaged to support our existing efforts, and we will be bringing our resources on earlier than normal. Relationships with our community partners are essential.
MACA and ECC are participating in reviews from the 2023 wildfires. McDonald said the review for his department began in November and is anticipated to be completed by the end of March. MLAs have said they'll be calling for public inquiry on top of those reviews. Natalie Pressman, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Meanwhile, the city of Yellowknife has announced its assessment of last year's wildfires is also officially underway. KPMG has been tasked with performing the review. It'll look at how the city responded to the wildfire danger and evacuation and lay out what worked and what did not. The public will have a chance to weigh in at engagement sessions. Those are expected in the next few weeks. European Union climate scientists say the world just breached a worrying threshold. For 12 straight months now, average global temperatures exceeded 1.5 degrees over pre-industrial times.
We're getting more extreme droughts, more extreme heat events that are happening more frequently. When they happen, they're more persistent, so they last longer, and they're more intense. So we see records being broken much more readily. We're also getting more extreme flooding events.
Experts say without a significant reduction in emissions, we'll reach a tipping point where extreme and record-breaking weather events will become more common. While the unprecedented warm temperatures remain a concern, it doesn't mean that the Paris climate target has been missed. That UN deal refers to average global temperature increase over decades. A new report shows Alberta has made little progress to protect threatened caribou. That's despite a conservation deal with the federal government. Andrea Hunkar has those details.
The report says dwindling habitat and industrial disturbance puts the remaining 15 herds under threat. It reveals multiple problems. Among them, that human disturbance increased in roughly 75% of caribou's habitat between 2018 and 2021. The average amount of critical habitat, uninterrupted by resource development or wildfire, is 19%. And overall, the caribou habitat has little to no protection. Despite this, government estimates say caribou numbers appear steady at about 2,000. The agreement between the province and Ottawa was struck in 2020. One of the major goals, to create plans laying out how industry, recreation, and homes can coexist alongside caribou. The report says that work is significantly behind. The report was released last month, 3 years after it was due. The Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society says that defeats the purpose, which is to monitor whether the agreement is working. CBC has contacted Ottawa and the province for comment. Andrea Hunkar, CBC News, Edmonton.
It's been a big week for the Yukon. The territory has been featured not once, but twice in the world's most famous newspaper. As Maria Tobin found out, tourism operators are already seeing the positive effects from the shoutouts.
A warm welcome in a remote capital. That's how Whitehorse is described in a recent New York Times destination publication. Named as one of the 52 must-see places in 2024, the Times story highlights the aurora borealis brightening the sky and the everlasting view of mountains. And tourism groups say they have already seen a spike in bookings.
I think it was instantaneously. The emails started rolling in and phone calls, so we couldn't be happier as a Yukon tour company to see that sort of traction right away.
While the scenery and northern lights grab the headlines, the piece also breaks down some of the wilderness city's businesses, such as the Eclipse Nordic Hot Springs, a common chill-out spot for locals and visitors alike. Owner Gary Umprick says being featured in the Times puts the territory on the tourism map, just like Alaska.
Our hope is that the Yukon and places like Eclipse Nordic Hot Springs can become more like household words around the world. Everybody around the world knows Alaska, but not everybody around the world knows the Yukon.
Umbrick says he's optimistic the feature will benefit the tourism sector, which is still recovering from the pandemic. COVID-19 was hard on the territory's tourism industry, and for the struggling sector, this week's coverage in the Times means the kind of attention you just can't buy. Maria Tobin, CBC News, Whitehorse.
A new wildlife tunnel in Nova Scotia appears to be working. The structure and the fencing leading to it were completed last year. As Paul Palmer tells us, animals are learning to take advantage of it as a safer way to get to the other side of the road.
This structure was built between the Hansport and Falmouth exits as a measure to provide more safety to drivers on the recently twinned Highway 101. It's a wildlife underpass or tunnel, and it may have taken animals a while to figure it out.
You typically see about a year before they're confident to start using the structure. It's obviously quite foreign to them, and they need to develop a degree of comfort with it before they will successfully enter and move all the way through a structure as long as this one.
These pictures captured by trail cameras and released by the department show deer are using the tunnel. While people like to see deer, they can be a menace near a highway. The fields in this area are littered with a significant white-tailed deer population that now can no longer travel across the highway at this location. They are now kept off the road surface by 3 kilometers of fencing that leads down to the tunnel. Other changes have been made to try and entice animals to travel all the way through.
One of the things that we've done is add logs and rocks to naturalize the interior a bit more, make it look a little less open, a little less scary. And almost as soon as we had that completed and other construction around the site had ceased, we started to see animals successfully moving all the way through the crossing.
The fence is located near a long bend in the highway where an average of 7,600 vehicles travel every day. Prior to the highway being twinned and the fencing put in place, there were an average of 9 vehicle-wildlife collisions a year, with the majority of them being deer. But other animals are also using the tunnel.
We've also seen regular use by raccoons, porcupines, at least one fox, and there has been a coyote sniffing around, but he hasn't built up the nerve to actually go through the crossing yet, as far as we can tell.
The fencing and 50-meter-long tunnel, which has an atrium at the midpoint to allow light to come in, cost over $1 million. But it's now making for a safer section of highway for both humans and animals for decades to come. Paul Pometer, CBC News, Falmouth.
Why, hello. It's me, Seth Rogen. 10 potters will be facing off in the most extraordinary ceramics competition show that this country has ever seen.
I'm Jen Robertson, and I'll be your host.
So are these potters ready?
This exploded.
To test their skills at the wheel and push themselves every week?
Oh, no.
So the ones that do stand out, they really do stand out.
And who will be named champion?
I'm excited to see it. Oh, wow.
Of the Great Canadian Pottery Throwdown.
How can any of this be fair?
Now, you might think, hey, we just need more doctors, but that's not really it.
A Russian scheme here
shows you where it starts, where it ends.
Were you really willing to risk that job?
Yes.
At Thunder Bay's favorite festival, Wake the Giant.
Ta-da! There it is.
It appears we have a mystery to solve.
You'll be next.
He's dead.
A murderer was murdered.
Toronto Constabulary, stop!
A volcano in Iceland erupted today for the second time this year and the third time since December. It's pumping lava up to 80 meters in the air over an area in a southwestern peninsula. Volcanic outbreaks in that region of Iceland are so-called fissure eruptions. They don't usually cause large explosions or a significant dispersal of ash into the stratosphere. But authorities are warning of further eruptions, and scientists say it could go on for years. A dike building program is underway to divert burning lava flows away from homes and critical infrastructure. The answers to the origins of life on Earth may lie in a shallow, unassuming lake 150 kilometers northwest of Kamloops, BC. Scientists say Last Chance Lake has the right ingredients for the formation of early life. Take a look.
Well, while we were looking for phosphate-rich lakes around the world, we came across a master's thesis from the University of Saskatchewan. You know, it's from the mid-1990s, but tucked away in an appendix at the back were some measurements of Last Chance Lake. And it turned out that when we looked at it, it was, okay, well, this is the most phosphate-rich lake in the world, as far as we can tell. Some things are quite different compared to the early Earth. So today we have a very oxygen-rich atmosphere, which of course we're all breathing. The early Earth had essentially no oxygen in the atmosphere. The other thing is that we have a lot of life around. Whenever you go to a lake today, there'll be something living in it. It might be some bacteria, some algae, some very small animals. So it's basically, there are some chemical conditions that are a little bit different, and also the biology, which is ubiquitous.
What attracted us to the lake in terms of our goal of exploring the origin of life is that this high phosphate concentration, and you need a lot of phosphate for some of the central chemical reactions that make the biochemical molecules that are, we think, crucial at the origin of life to emerge from chemistry. And that includes RNA, which is a little sister of DNA. So it's we think that was very likely the first carrier of genetic information. For the first life would have used RNA. And to make RNA and the building blocks of RNA, there's a group of scientists you could call periodic synthesis chemists who try to explore potential recipes for the origin of life to make these first biomolecules. And they consistently need a lot of phosphate to make the building blocks of RNA, this very crucial molecule for the origin of life.
Dogs can help us in many ways, including, it turns out, in healthcare. In fact, one hospital in Vancouver is using them to sniff out diseases in hospitals. The CBC's Darius Madavi spent the day with some of the team.
We're here at Vancouver General Hospital, where we're going to meet a very special team called the Canine Care Team. And here we have Traveler.
So we started 7 years ago with a program that we're looking to see if the dogs can detect environmental reservoirs of Clostridium difficile, C. diff, one of the superbugs. We saw a program in the Netherlands where a dog named Cliff was looking at patients on a unit to identify the patients that had C. diff on the unit. Here we can rapid check patients. We got the fast snap test, but there's no logistical feasible way to search the environment. So the dogs with their super sniffer capabilities fit that bill. So for the dogs, it's a game of association. They learn that if they find what they really like, was a toy or food, they get really good at finding that, and that's a game for them. Once they're good at that, we up the game a little bit and we associate it with whatever our target odor is going to be. For these dogs, it'll be C. diff. When they're good at that game, it's just the C. diff that's out there to find, and the dogs learn, if I find this C. diff that they've hidden, I get what I really want, which is for Anton a tennis ball and for Traveler, turkey. Right now, we're the only hospital in North America running a program like this. We've covered 32 hospitals throughout Canada, but we're centered right in Vancouver.
What are we looking at here?
So this is one of our training hides. It's made by our medical microbiology team down in the lab. There's a polymer plastic tube inside. It's called a GetScent tube, and it's specially created to collect VOC, so volatile organic compounds, so the things that make things smell. So the little molecules of the C. diff odor get trapped in that tube, and so we're able to present the dog with the true odor of C. diff, but it's safe to train with, so because it's not going to contain any of the spores on it. So really, this is open doors. We're only limited by our imagination as to what now we can use the dogs to detect, especially in a hospital environment. So right now we're looking at what our options might be to further expand to another pathogen, or to use them as a different type of tool, a quality assurance tool.
You get it!
Get it!
Yeah, you get it!
So when the dog's alert, we have a team that comes with us while we're doing a screening, and part of that team is our housekeeping staff, our environmental services staff, and they immediately take care of whatever the dog's alerted on with cleaning and disinfecting. Lots of people ask if our dogs just live at the hospital or what happens with them. Our dogs live with their partners, their people partners, or some of the dogs who are super busy and crazy, they also live in a kennel setting.
You said, who has cookies? Who has cookies?
Oh. So we partnered during the COVID pandemic, we partnered with Health Canada to do just a proof of concept if we could train dogs to alert us to COVID positive patient samples, and then if we could transfer that knowledge the dogs had learned in the lab setting to a long-term residence facility, and we ran a 6-week pilot project with that. And the dogs, unfortunately, we didn't have any COVID positive patients during that time at the residence, but the dogs were able to transfer their skills, no problem. So really that's just given us a roadmap for what we can do next for a virus or another bacteria.
Oh boy.
3 friends in Calgary are living out every lottery player's dream. After almost 2 decades of playing, the former coworkers finally hit the jackpot, taking home a $50 million Lotto 649 prize. Colleen Underwood introduces us to the winners.
Congratulations, Carmen, Catherine, and Gary, on this life-changing moment.
Carmen Austria, Gary Perkins, and Catherine Wall slowly settle into life as Calgary's newest multimillionaires. The 3 worked together for many years, purchasing their weekly Lotto ticket, and even as they started to retire, the tradition carried on until they finally bought the winning ticket on December 9th. Austria couldn't believe what she read when she checked the ticket.
I went up to my husband, and he was taking a shower, and I got him out of the shower and said, "Tell me I'm not reading this wrong." I won't tell you what he said, but he swore. And he said, "I'm retiring."
And while Austria says she immediately took time off to visit her family in Chile, Perkins said he didn't waste any time.
I was at the Ford dealership the next day. Picked up a new truck 8 days later. I've been preparing for this for a long time.
Catherine Wall says for her, the biggest change is being able to retire.
Usually you give them a lot of notice, and so they said, "Look, so when are you thinking?" I was like, "In a week." And they're like, "Oh, okay."
They say winning with friends has multiplied their joy because not only can they share their money, but also this moment with people they love. Colleen Underwood, CBC News, Calgary.
2 Air Inuit pilots shared a unique experience earlier this week. The pilots, both female and both Inuk, shared the cockpit. Melissa Haney was the first officer on the flight. She's been working in aviation for about 20 years, and this was a first for her.
I would like to bring something back. I'd like to create something very similar for our community here in the South. And Inuit Games is a passion of mine that I'd like to see.
So I think we have maybe the wrong thing here. They're talking about the Inuit Games, the first ever Inuit South Games, and that's what we're seeing there. But what we were talking about, so I'll just finish it up, is the first time that Melissa Haney, who's been in the aviation industry for 20 years, had both female Inuk staff in the cockpit, and this was with Air Inuit. She says this was a first for her, and she says she was actually the first female Inuk pilot with Air Inuit. She reached the rank of captain in 2016. Now, Zoe Cronenberg was the co-pilot on the flight. She's been with Air Inuit for 5 years. She moved up from flight attendant all the way to pilot, and both women encourage young Inuit women to follow their dreams. So really great advice from those 2 women, and a surprise Southern Inuit Games, which we're always happy to see anyways. That is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, you can go to our website, cbc.ca/north. We leave you with a look at the weather. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.